In this video, we're gonna go through how you get the best audio using the DJI mic. These microphones are super small, super compact, and they're fairly easy to use. However, there are a few settings that you have to play with to be able to get the best audio out of these wireless transmitters. Now, I did another video around the DJI mic, which is a complete beginner's guide that goes over every button and everything that's in the microphone. And this video is a little bit different. I'm gonna go through how you get the best audio using the different settings within the microphone. Because there's been a lot of questions around how you use the receiver gain or the transmitter gain or the low cut filter or some of the other settings that are gonna impact the quality of your recording. So this video is dedicated to understanding the different settings and how it changes the audio that you're recording. If you want a full breakdown of everything on these microphones, I'll include a link down below in the description to where you can watch that beginner's guide. Now, before we jump into this, I just want to say a special thanks to DJI for sponsoring this video. All right, so right now you're hearing the audio from the DJI mic. I just have it recording right here on my chest. And I'm just doing a backup recording. So I'm gonna sync this up later when I get in my editing software. And that's one way that you can use these microphones. These can be a standalone mic, or they can be plugged directly into your camera. And so let's go through the difference of what it means when you're outputting to a camera versus recording just on the device itself. So there's two different scenarios that I wanted to go through. One is the solo creator just using this mic independently, and the second is going through if you have two people mic'd up. Because with the DJI mic, you have two transmitters, one receiver, depending on the kit that you bought. You can buy this as a standalone where you get one transmitter, one receiver, or you can get it with two transmitters, one receiver. Now with these microphones, there's two channels, and that's the most you can add on this microphone. You can't add 3 or 4 or any additional transmitters beyond the initial 2. The DJI mic only works with 2 transmitters. So if you need to mic up more than 2 people, you'll need to have more than one set of the DJI mic. So let's first go over working as a solo creator. So when you have this microphone, you're gonna have the one transmitter and one receiver. Now you can either use this as a standalone microphone and not even connect the receiver, or you can add the receiver on top of your camera and output the recording directly into the camera. The benefit of outputting to your camera is that you never have to sync up anything in the edit. But the benefit of using this as a standalone transmitter is that you'll never have issues with wireless connection. Sometimes these transmitters might not get a clean signal from the transmitter to the receiver, depending on what's between you and the transmitter. They do work super well, and I've had a lot of success working with these transmitters. I lost the camera. Oh, there you are, right there. Okay, so I'm on this ridgeline. You guys are over on that ridgeline. I'm gonna hike that way, and then I'm gonna come back and get the camera. However, with any wireless system, there could be issues between the transmitter and the receiver, just depending on your environment and the type of video that you're shooting. So if you're ever worried about the transmission signal between the transmitter and the receiver, you'll want to record directly on the transmitter itself. And you can either do this with the receiver connected, or you can run this as a standalone just audio recorder. You never actually have to connect this to a receiver to use it. So let's go over the first scenario. Say you're a solo creator and you want to output your audio to your camera. So you're going to connect your receiver to your camera. You're going to have your audio somewhere on you where you can get clean audio. And then you have to figure out what are the settings that you want to use to output to the camera. Well, the first thing that you need to decide is whether you're going to use mono recording or mono with a safety track. There's also the option to do stereo recording, but you won't want to use that with just one transmitter. So to access this menu, you swipe down and then you're gonna see what mode you're in. Right now I'm in stereo mode, but if I click once, it'll pull up this screen where you can see stereo on the left and the transmitter 1 and 2 on the right. Click the stereo, it's gonna switch over to mono. You can click it again, it's gonna go mono with a safety channel. So with audio, you have a left and a right channel. That creates a stereo pair. Think of it like headphones on your head, a left and a right. And so when you're recording to the left channel, it's only gonna be going to the left ear. And if you're only recording to the right channel, it's going to the right ear. So when you're in the stereo recording mode, well, you're only recording on either the left or the right when you're using one transmitter. So this is audio using one transmitter in the stereo mode. You can see the L on the screen means that I'm only recording to the left channel. So if you're listening to this with headphones or speakers, you'll only hear me on the left side. So if I swipe down, click this button, and click into mono, now you're gonna hear me on both sides. So you're gonna hear me on both the left and the right channel equally because it's the exact same audio going to both channels. So it's gonna be the exact same audio, but it's gonna be both on the left and the right. So when you listen to it back using headphones or speakers, you'll hear it on both the left and the right. That's what mono recording is. Now, mono with safety basically splits that up between your left and your right, and one channel is gonna be recorded at the level that you set, and the other channel is recorded lower. So right now you're hearing me in mono. I'm gonna switch over to mono with a safety channel. Now, if you have headphones on, you're gonna hear that one ear is gonna be louder than the other. So one ear is gonna be recorded at the level that I have set, and the other ear is gonna be recorded at -6 decibels lower. And the reason for this is if you're in a setting where things get super loud and then quiet and then loud, you want to have that safety track in case things get too loud and it distorts your audio. That way you can always use that backup recording that's -20 decibels lower, and you're not going to have bad audio if that main channel got too loud and now it's all distorted. So in most settings where you're going to be setting your audio, if you're running this as an individual and just one transmitter, you'll just want to use the mono recording. The only time that you'll want to use that safety is if you really think there's going to be situations where it's going to get super loud or people are going to be yelling and it's going to disrupt the audio recording. Now with a single transmitter, there's no reason to use the stereo mode because you're only going to get audio on either the left or the right. And so if you're listening to it back in your headphones, you'll only hear it in one channel, left or right. Now keep in mind, when you're recording audio and it's going to your camera, the stereo, mono, and safety affect the audio that's being outputted from the DJI mic into the camera. It does not affect the backup recording. And I'll talk about the backup recording in a little bit. All right, so now let's talk about using two microphones. So for example, if you're doing an interview or you have two people on camera and you want to mic up both at the same time, well, you could use both transmitters and they'll go to your receiver and output the same as if you're just using one transmitter. The difference is how it's being recorded. So this is microphone number 1 and this is microphone number 2. So when you're recording with two microphones, you can still use the mono, stereo, or mono with a safety track, but depending on what you want to do when you're editing your video, it's going to dictate whether you're going to use the stereo or the mono. So mono works the exact same, however now both transmitters are going to be on both audio tracks. So your left and your right channel are both going to have the exact same audio, and it's going to be a mix of both transmitters at the same time. So there's no way that you can independently change the recording later when you bring it into your editing software. And it's the same with the mono with the safety track. Both mics are gonna blend into one audio track that's gonna be mono, and it's gonna be put on both the left and the right channel, but one channel is gonna be lower than the other. That's your safety if things get super loud. Now, how you'll typically want to use two microphones is in the stereo mode. And this is where each microphone is going to be recorded independently on each track, so the left and the right channel. They're not blended. And so this allows you to edit each one independently when you get into your editing software. Now, when you play back the audio without editing it, you're going to hear both tracks and they're going to be independent. Okay, so if you have headphones on right now, you'll be able to hear both microphones equally because they're pretty much in the same spot. But I'm going to take one of these microphones and I'm going to put it out behind me. So now you're only going to hear one side well and the other side is going to sound distant. And that's because I'm recording both of these independently. So one channel on the left is going to be one of the microphones and the other channel on the right is going to be the other microphone. And so this difference is going to allow you to be able to edit both of these independently when you bring it into your editing software because they're not mixed. So personally, I use Final Cut Pro. And the way that you do this is you go in, you break apart both of these audio files and make them dual mono. And to be able to work with each one independently is I duplicate my audio on a secondary track, and on each track I'll turn off one of the transmitters so that I can work with them independently and be able to bring down the audio or bring up the audio and be able to just mix it so that it's much cleaner. Now, all of these settings that we've been talking about is going from your receiver and outputting into your camera. So your camera needs to have a stereo input to be able to use these settings. If you're using something with two inputs, you'll need to have a splitter coming out of the receiver to go to each input independently. However, most mirrorless cameras will have a stereo input, and so just using this little cable that comes with the DJI mic, it's going to be able to take the audio from the DJI mic receiver and be able to put it onto the camera's recording. Now, the last thing that you can adjust when you're outputting to your camera is the receiver gain. Now, this is how loud the recording is going out of the receiver and into the camera. Now, the scale on this goes from negative 12 decibels up to positive 12 decibels. So this is how loud it's outputting from the receiver into the camera. And so its default is 0, but you might want to adjust this depending on your camera's settings. Now, to access your receiver gain, you're going to swipe down and you swipe right once, and that will open up your receiver gain. Just tap on that, and then you can control this up or down. So depending on the camera that you're using, you're going to be able to adjust the audio louder or quieter. So on my Sony, I can go into my audio record level, and I can adjust this from 0 all the way up to 31. And this is going to adjust how loud the audio is being recorded on my A7S III. And so you're going to have these two controls, one coming out of the receiver and the camera itself, that you'll have to adjust to get the best recording. So ideally, when you're recording audio, you want it between negative 12 and negative 6. If you go too high and you're above negative 6, you could start getting distortion and it's going to sound bad. And if you record it too low, well, you're going to have to boost that audio in your editing software, and then you're going to introduce a lot of noise into the recording. So this is audio that's being recorded too high, and you can hear how it's distorted and it just sounds awful. Now this is audio recorded too low, so you can barely hear it. So ideally, you want to record your audio somewhere between negative 12 and negative 6. That's typically where I leave it when I'm recording. So you're going to use both the receiver gain and your camera's gain to find the proper audio settings to get the cleanest audio. So if you go negative 12 on the receiver gain, well, you're going to have to boost your camera's audio louder, which may introduce some noise into the recording. Whereas if you boost your receiver gain to plus 12, you're going to really have to reduce the audio gain in your camera to be able to get a clean recording. So when I set my receiver gain, I try to keep it at 0. And then I adjust my camera settings so that my recording's hitting between negative 12 and negative 6. So on my A7S III, I'm recording at 9 on the camera's meter. So you're just gonna have to figure out between your camera and the receiver what's gonna sound the best. And I highly suggest going through and outputting different gains from the receiver and different levels on your camera and listen to the difference. What you're looking for is when the audio gets distorted and also when you introduce too much noise into the recording. Typically, you want to record your cameras a little bit lower. You don't want to boost too much in camera, but the same goes for the receiver. You don't want to boost all the way up to plus 12 because the sound's going to start getting distorted when you get to that level. Now, when you're working with a smartphone, your receiver is going to act a little bit different. So when you have the lightning adapter attached, it's only going to output a mono track. So your stereo or your mono with safety don't mean anything when you're using the lightning port. The mono takes over and that's all you can use with the lightning. Now with USB-C, it does output a stereo track. So all of the same settings apply that we were talking about with the camera with a device that's inputting a USB-C. Now I highly suggest whatever device you're using, whether it's a phone or camera, always test all of these recordings before you actually go out and try to shoot using these settings so that you make sure you know exactly what you're gonna get with the type of device that you're using with the receiver. All right, so now let's talk about the backup recording on the transmitters themselves and some settings that you should set on these transmitters. Because there's a few things that might confuse you because you can set the gain of the transmitter separately than the gain of the receiver. But you need to understand how you set both so you get the cleanest recordings. First, let's go over how you actually use the backup recording. So out of the box, when you power on the transmitter, there is a backup recording button on the transmitter itself. You just click it once, the red light's gonna turn on, and now you're backup recording. Now on the receiver, you can scroll up with your finger, and there's also a backup recording here. So this is where you can turn it on or off. So out of the box, by default, you can always turn your backup recording on and off using the button on the side of the transmitter. And also, when you swipe up on the receiver, you can control this backup recording by clicking the record button on and off. Now you'll see when you swipe up on the receiver, there's an option to format the memory in your transmitter. Now you don't actually need to ever format your memory if you don't want to, because how these transmitters work is that once you fill up the card that's on the transmitter, it's just gonna start overwriting the oldest data on the transmitter. So you never actually have to worry about formatting these if you don't want to. However, if you want to keep it clean between shoots, then you can format it and erase everything on the transmitter. Now these transmitters are recording a 24-bit wave mono file, and that's important to remember the transmitter only records a mono file. That means on a stereo pair, the left and the right channel are going to be identical. So there's only one style of recording that you can do with the transmitter. It doesn't do stereo recording, and it also doesn't do mono with a safety track recording. So if you are trying to use the safety track, that only outputs out of the receiver into the camera. The actual DJI mic is a mono track only. So whatever you record on this one transmitter, it's just a single mono file. Now what you can control on the transmitter is your gain, and it's the same as the receiver gain. It goes from -12 to +12, and by default it's set at 0. Now the transmitter gain is going to control how loud the transmitter is recording your voice. And this is going to impact the backup recording, but it's also going to impact the receiver, what it's outputting. So if you go up on the transmitter gain, it's going to make the transmitter louder, and it's also going to make the recording coming out of the receiver louder. So you're going to have to use a combination of your transmitter gain, your receiver gain, and your in-camera gain to be able to control your audio to get the cleanest recording. So out of the box by default, they're zeroed out. However, what I've found is that I boost my transmitters to +6. That's what I've found works well for me and gives me a good backup recording that I can use, but then also doesn't distort it when it goes to my receiver and outputs to my camera. So you're gonna have to use all three of these in unison to be able to get the cleanest recording. So if your audio is being recorded too loud, you might either bring down your transmitter, your receiver, or your camera's audio. And so you have these three different points where you can control your audio, and to get the cleanest recording, you're gonna have to use them all independently to figure out what works best. Now, what I've found with these backup transmitters, if you bring your transmitter gain too low, well, your recording is going to be super quiet when you bring it into your editing software out of the backup recording. So to get better audio out of these transmitters, I've had to boost it to around +6. That's what's worked for me for the backup recording. And so if you're using a backup recording, you need to figure out what level sounds best with the voice that you're using to be able to get a clean backup recording, and then adjust the receiver gain and the camera audio accordingly depending on that transmitter gain. I know it can kind of seem confusing with all of these different points, but the easiest way to figure out how each one of these works is to do a bunch of different recordings and change the levels on the transmitter, receiver, and your camera, and start finding what works best for the audio that you're recording. And you want to do all this before you go out and actually shoot, because the worst thing is if you get out on location and you have an interview with 2 people and you come back and the audio is all messed up because your receiver gain was set wrong, well, that's something you want to avoid. So after watching this video, you're going to want to go through all of these settings and really play around with them so that you can figure out how to get the cleanest audio using the DJI mic. Now there's a few other settings that I want to go over with the transmitter. The first is the record stop lock. So with the record stop lock, when you turn it on, when you click the record button on the side of the DJI mic, it's going to start the recording, but if you click it again, it won't stop the recording. Now this is super useful if you're working with other people or if you're worried about bumping this recording while you're out filming. And so how you're going to have to turn off the backup recording is either by turning off the actual transmitter or turning off the recording using the receiver. It's a safety feature so that you don't accidentally turn off the backup recording while you're in the middle of a take. Now, another setting that you can turn on is auto record. And how this works is when the setting's turned on, your transmitter will always do a backup recording whenever it's turned on. So it doesn't have to be connected to the receiver, and you don't have to press any buttons. Use power on the transmitter, it's gonna start recording, and you power off the transmitter and it's gonna stop recording. And the record button on the side of the transmitter is not going to do anything when you have it in this mode. So if you're just using this as a standalone recorder, you could just turn it on, starts recording, turn it off, it stops recording. It's just a super easy way to use this as an individual product because you don't have to have this connected to the receiver to be able to use it as a backup recorder. Now also in the menu, you can change the brightness of the lights on the transmitters, because when you have it set up like this, where it's just right on your chest or somewhere visible, these lights could be super bright. And so you can go into your menu settings and change the brightness of these lights so that they're dim and you can barely see them. And the last feature that you're going to want to play around with is your low cut filter. So on the transmitters, you have a low cut filter, which is going to remove all of your lower frequencies, which are things like noise in the background. If you're going to be editing your audio later in your editing software, I would avoid using the low cut filter. But if you're trying to minimize the amount of post-production and just use the audio straight from these transmitters or the recording that's going straight onto the camera, the low cut filter could be something that you'll use to be able to minimize the amount of noise in the background of your recording. So after watching this video, go do some sample recordings with your low cut filter turned on and low cut filter turned off so you can hear the difference of how it sounds with the types of filming that you're gonna do. And if you wanna access these menu settings, you swipe down, scroll over to your transmitter settings, and this is where you'll find low cut, transmitter gain, record lock stop, auto record, vibration notification, and LED brightness. So all of your settings for the transmitters are under this one menu. And the last thing about these transmitters is how the file records. So every 30 minutes, it's gonna break up the backup recording. So if you are recording hour, 2 hour long files, you're gonna see every 30 minutes, it's gonna break up the file. So that's just something to keep in mind when you attach this to your computer and you see multiple files for one recording. Now you don't need any special software to get the backup recording off of these transmitters. You just plug in using the USB-C. It's gonna show up as a removable device on your computer, and you can just go in and pull the files directly off. Now to link up your backup recording with your camera, it's gonna depend on the type of software that you're using and your workflow. But typically what I do is I either use a multicam clip in Final Cut Pro, or I'll just create a secondary layer underneath my main file and find the audio waveforms where they match up and just sync them up and then turn off the audio from my camera if I need to use the backup recording. Now let's talk about how you use these microphones and where you place them. So they are omnidirectional. So that means that they're recording in basically 360 sphere. So you just want the microphone placed somewhere close enough to your mouth to be able to hear a clean recording. So if you put the mic pretty far away, you can hear the difference between these mics. This is the audio that you're hearing right now from my chest, and now this is the audio that you're hearing extended out away on the arm. You're gonna have a difference in quality depending on the position of the microphone. So ideally, you want the microphone somewhere around your chest level, and the cleanest is gonna be right in front underneath your mouth. So for me, I just put it on the outside of my shirt when I don't care about seeing the actual product. However, with the magnet that comes on the back of the DJI mic, you can place this underneath the shirt, and the only thing that you'll see is this little black square on the front. Now, if you're using something like a collared shirt or a button-up shirt, then you'll either clip it on or you could put it with the magnet and you'll be able to make it disappear between the button-up shirt. Now, one way that I like to use it is I put it on my Shimoda backpack, and I'll just put it right on my front strap wherever I'm recording. But just keep in mind, whenever you're recording with a microphone placed right here on your chest, if you turn away and you're looking one direction, well, the audio is gonna change versus when you're projecting forwards and the microphone's right here. So if my microphone was, say, on my strap right here, and I was talking this way, but then I changed and I start talking this way, well, the audio is gonna shift. So ideally, you wanna make sure that you know where your audio placement is and you're always projecting in that direction so that you're getting clean audio. So if you do put it on somewhere off to the side, if you're using like a backpack, just don't turn away from it because that's when you're gonna get bad audio. You'll just want it somewhere in the vicinity of your chest, and you'll always wanna be recording kind of talking forward. Now, the other way that you can use these microphones is with a lavalier mic. And when you're using a lavalier mic plugged into the mic input, you just have to play around with your transmitter gain, your receiver gain, and your camera's audio because every mic that you plug in into the transmitters might change the level at which it's recording. So not every microphone is the same, and they're not gonna be the same as the audio that's being recorded with the actual mic of the DJI mic. So again, you're gonna have to just go through this process of always playing with your transmitter gain and your receiver gain to get your audio to where it's hitting between -6 and -12 without getting too loud where it's distorting, but then also not recording too quiet. And also when you're outside, you'll wanna use the windscreen. So the windscreen just pops right on and it's pretty easy to use, but any wind sound that hits this microphone is gonna be greatly reduced when you're using the windscreen. So I always have this windscreen on no matter what's going on outside because just the littlest breeze, you'll hear a if you don't have it on. Now, one of the things you need to think about is the types of clothes that you're wearing. You can hear from this audio right here. The last year has been a pretty wild ride in terms of making content. I was looking back on all the videos that I've made this year. I was using my puffy jacket and you could hear the scratching of the puffy jacket, especially because the mic was placed on the inside of the strap. So for a situation like this, I might want to put the microphone outside away from that jacket as much as possible, or somewhere like on a camera backpack strap where it's away from the rustling of the jacket. So anything that touches the microphone is going to create some rustling sounds, and so you'll just want to try to avoid that as much as possible when you're doing your recording. So use these settings to get the cleanest recording out of your DJI mic. And next, make sure you check out this video right here, which goes through a complete beginner's guide on everything around the DJI mic and all of the different buttons that we didn't go over in this video. I'll see you over there.